what's one mistake you see over and over again that organizations make when trying to become more resilient?
Yeah, I think it goes back to
On this episode, our guest is Robby Gulri, the field CTO and head of partner success at RapidScale, where he helps lean IT teams unlock the power of cloud, security, and AI. A longtime innovator, he's launched SaaS products generating over 250 million in ARR and has held leadership roles at companies like Yahoo, Illuminate 360, and Solvality. Beyond the boardroom, Robby is a force for good. He serves on the Atlanta Technical College Board and founded Seva Security, a nonprofit focused on closing the digital divide. He has helped raise an impressive $11 million in grants and delivers over $1 million a year in pro bono consulting to underserved communities. A Georgia Tech engineer with an MBA from Georgia State, Robby holds certifications in Cisco, AWS, and data privacy. He's fluent in 4 languages, proud of his Indian roots, and passionate about blending tech with impact. Catch him on stage, on podcasts, or mentoring the next generation, but always pushing tech forward with purpose. All right. Hey, everybody. This is Tin, and today we have Robby. So, Robby, how are you today?
I am great, and thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited to talk to you this morning.
Awesome. So, in your bio, you say that you learned English by listening to baseball announcers. Could you share more about that unique experience and how it might have influenced you in your communication style?
Dan, thank you for actually reading my bio. Yeah, absolutely. I moved to the States when I was 10, almost 11 years old from India, from North India, from Punjab. Obviously, English is not my first language. And so I took it upon myself to very quickly try to assimilate into the US. And language obviously is the biggest component of that. And I instantly gravitated towards baseball when I was a child, when I was a kid. And I used to play a little cricket in India. And so baseball just made a lot of sense to me, and I would listen to these announcers over and over again. I mean, names that you may not recognize, but some of the audience may. People like Joe Buck and Harry Carey and Skip Carey and John Sterling, and they always sounded very, very smart. And they also sounded very neutral. Like they didn't have a Southern accent or a New York accent or a Minnesota accent. They were very sort of neutral. And I kind of told myself, I'm like, man, I'm going to sound like that when I grew up. And so what I would do is I would watch the Atlanta Braves. I'm a huge Atlanta Braves fan, and they would play the game. Then they play episodes of like Scooby Doo and Flintstones. I would watch the cartoons, and then they'd play the same game again. We just didn't have a lot of content back in the '80s, and so the second time around, I would literally like turn down the volume, and I would literally just do play by play to myself. And
Wow.
so over time, that's sort of how I learned English pretty quickly. How it's helped me, I think you can attest to this. When you're learning English at a later age, you're having to digest a lot of information very quickly.
Hmm.
And so you're having to point to certain, some linguistic and non-linguistic sort of key and triggers that basically help you, just communicate better. And I think that ability to kind of do that at a young age and sort of naturally has helped me in my career. I feel like my superpower is the ability to take really complex things, cybersecurity, cyber resilience, some of the things we're going to talk about today, and then translate those into something that's meaningful for non-technical people, business decision makers, et cetera. So ultimately, that's what I do. I mean, if you sort of break down my day to day, that's pretty much what I do is I spend a lot of time with business owners and operators and CIOs and just trying to translate very complex principles into simple, actionable ways.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I am also my native language is French, so I also had to learn English. Well, I didn't have to, but I did because my friend was only a English speaker. In fourth grade, I met her, and then what happened was that we spent all summer together, and I learned English via, wanting to be friends with her and then having her as my neighbor. So we were together all the time. So I jumped in and then the rest is history, I guess.
Right.
And luckily at a French speaking school, we had English classes, right? And it was easier then afterwards to be in those English classes and learning more about English. Yeah. And now tell me, as a Advent reader, how do you select your books and articles
Mm.
that you read? And how does those insight influence your daily life?
Wow. Didn't expect that question. That's a great question. Honestly, it's funny. We're on a podcast and we're going to talk a little bit about technology and security and cyber resilience today. But often what I read is not even technical stuff. I mean, I do enjoy reading about technology and the evolution of technology. Obviously, spend a lot of time these days learning about AI and all the potential downsides and upsides of AI. But often what I read are books on Buddhist philosophy
Mm,
and mindfulness and stoicism. Read probably 500 books on Buddhist philosophy. So if I'm my best self is in the corner reading a book about just philosophical approaches to life 2,500 years ago and how applicable they are, even more so now in 2025. I feel like that helps me and it helps businesses kind of focus in. It's easy for us, kind of the shiny coin syndrome, right? You see a new thing, a new widget, a new piece of technology out in the corner, and the human tendency is to go run after it. It's that desire. And I feel like even more so in business and technology, in all these transformations and evolution in the world today, it's natural for us to go run there and see if we can leverage that to basically help us. It's harder to stay in the lane. It's harder to stay focused. It's harder to stay much more intentional. So I feel like a lot of that personal reading frankly helps me a lot in my communication, in my digestion of this information, as well as my sort of ability to articulate these concepts to people.
that's great. And also, it gives you like a great perspective, right?
Yeah, and I think perspective, and I know you're going to appreciate this, and some of our listeners who are and viewers who are basically maybe not raised here in America, is you just have a perspective that you normally, I don't know, maybe I'm making some generalizations you wouldn't have if you were just in born in America. We've seen poverty, we've seen people that frankly just don't have a lot and don't have a lot of choices. In America, we have the complete opposite choices. I can go whatever career I want. I can be a podcaster, I can be a CTO, I can be a doctor, I can do pretty much whatever I want because I've got choices in front of me. A lot of folks in the world don't have that. And so that in itself gives me and others like me a lot of perspective.
Now, tell me, what pulled you into cybersecurity and what keeps you there?
Yeah. So I'm dating myself from 2005 to about 2015, 2016. I used to work at an email security business. In fact, a pretty young company. We grew the business. That technology we built is used all over the world for secure email communications as well as identity management. I really got a flavor of early cybersecurity then, really back in 2004, 2005. What keeps me there is if you think about what's happened just in the last 5, 10 years, the nature of work has changed. No longer are we working inside the four walls.
Hmm.
We're working from everywhere and nowhere. We're working from home. We're working from airports. We're working from Starbucks. So obviously that introduces a whole layer of security that we didn't even think about 10 years ago. COVID definitely helped or hurt, depending on how you look at it, with that dynamic as well. So people, the distributed nature of work, the distributed nature of applications, the distributed nature of business and globalization just has introduced a whole slew of cybersecurity vulnerabilities, incidences, zero-day threats, et cetera, that frankly keep me pretty in tuned, and it keeps me on the edge to learn and continue to sort of evolve my skill set and be able to again bring that back to my customer base. And I don't think those challenges are getting any easier just because we have better technology and better tools and better AI. Guess what? The bad actors also have the same things. And so our ability to honestly not only keep up but to keep one step ahead of the bad actors is something that really, keeps me up at night and frankly keeps me super motivated.
Awesome. So you spoke a lot about AI. What AI tools do you use?
Wow. Lately, I've been using Manus a lot. For those of you who may not be familiar with Manus, it's almost an agentic workflow engine, and it'll help me do a lot of intelligence and research on certain areas. I'll give you a couple of examples. I was doing some research on a particular client or prospect recently, and so I dug in, used Manus to basically give me a detailed report on what's happening inside that business based on, again, the data sets that are available to that model, what business triggers are leading to certain technology decisions, whether it's cybersecurity or otherwise, and help me dig into how to potentially target that particular prospect with certain insights that otherwise they would not have. That's just one example. If I want to just learn about the latest blockchain trends. I did that recently. You can basically create a workflow within Manus to be able to kind of work in the background, generate a pretty detailed report, and then, it's not perfect, but it gives you enough to basically, start kind of building your knowledge base fairly quickly. I use Manus a lot. I use the reasoning engines of the LLMs, Gemini and ChatGPT enough to go through a methodology or an approach to go from my query or trying to understand something into, a logical way to basically look at things. And so as an engineer, I naturally think in methodology and steps and process. And so these agentic workflow engines and models that are available to us kind of naturally help you with those sort of thought processes.
So, in one sentence, what does resilient mean to you today?
Wow. In one sentence, the easiest way I would explain it, and I actually explained this way recently. If you think about historically, cybersecurity, you get 10 people in a room and you ask them the very simple question, what is cybersecurity? You're going to get 12 different answers, right? Some people may think that that's a I don't know, antivirus thing on your laptop. Some people may think that's a defender on your phone. Some people may think that that's some kind of policy on a firewall, and those are all true, right? Those are all elements of cybersecurity. Where cyber resilience really is going is you're literally shifting from looking at cybersecurity defensively and as like if something happens, let me respond to it, to be much more proactive, much more offense oriented. So that would be the easiest way to explain it is to go from defense, from a security posture to more of an offense in terms of security posture.
Okay. Now, we're both big fans of the IT Crowd show, the British sitcom.
Yeah.
As the field CTO of Rapid Scale, what would be a suggestion you would give to the IT team to build their resilience?
Yeah. So, if you think about the word resilience means that, regardless of a natural disaster, ransomware, zero-day threat, whatever happens to your organization, you still basically need to stay resilient. I hate to define the word with the word. My English teacher taught me that. But ultimately, you still want to stay operational, even when things are going, sideways. That's ultimately the goal, right? So how do you do that? It's making sure your workloads are distributed, making sure whatever cloud environments you're on are also distributed, making sure that you have a backup plan, making sure that you have a DR plan in place, and a DR plan that actually has been tested and validated and verified. There's a lot of companies that put DR technology in place and they've never tested it. I see that every single day. So my simple recommendation to anybody listening and thinking about cyber resiliency is now you're going from, like I said, a defensive posture to an offensive posture. And what you're doing is you're really inclusive of not just the typical cybersecurity solutions that are available to you, but you're really thinking about, recovery of data very quickly. You're thinking about RPO and RTO, sort of real-time objectives and how you basically go about recovering your data, kind of at the point that, a ransomware attack occurred. And so you're really, again, thinking about it much more holistically. And you're not just thinking about technology, you're thinking about your people and your process and your technology and how each of those impact, basically your strategy.
Yep, I totally agree with that.
And I'll add one more thing. I'll add one more thing. Cyber resiliency is a conversation now, not at the IT, conference room in the corner. It's at the board, right?
Mhm.
Any publicly available calls that you listen to from CEOs all over the country at Fortune 100 companies, even if it's for 2 or 3 minutes, there's always a talk about, making sure that the business stays operational, not if, but when, disaster occurs. So it's a board level conversation now.
Yep, I totally agree with that. What is a security incident or trend you've seen recently that made you stop and say, we're not ready?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Wow, some of the trends, I kind of mentioned it earlier, right? The same tools we use, the AI sort of driven tools that we use to increase productivity, to generate targeted emails, to generate, targeted sort of campaigns, et cetera, are the same tools that the bad actors are using to target phishing attacks, to be much more intentional about how they go about their business as well. So number one is AI. There's definitely some benefit to AI, but there's also a downside of AI, and we have to recognize that as IT leaders. Number two is this notion of we used to worry. I'm old. I've been in technology for a long time. We used to worry about shadow IT. Now we have to worry about shadow AI. And ultimately, for those of you maybe not familiar with that term, shadow AI is we may be losing corporate IP, intellectual property, as well as important data about our business from users using these LLMs, publicly facing LLMs. And maybe they're not even thinking about it that way. They're just basically using them to gain productivity opportunities. But what we call sort of shadow AI is an increased threat as well. The other thing that we see often, given the globalization of business and supply chain basically being everywhere, is, if you will, compromises in the supply chain that bypass sort of traditional defenses. So you're seeing all kinds of injection and edge vulnerabilities that are introduced not only from employees but potentially vendors, contractors, and third party sort of entities that may be connected to the business in some way.
That's interesting. So, what's one mistake you see over and over again that organizations make when trying to become more resilient?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the shift in mindset. Goes back to what we started with, is the word mindset is, kind of, I'm a big fan of the Buddhist philosophy, and a lot of people still have that legacy mindset, meaning that they believe that prevention equals security. It's actually the other way around. It's proactiveness and being offensive really equals cyber resilience. So you got to think about it from a different lens. So that's definitely one mistake, or one shift. I shouldn't call it a mistake. It's a shift that organizations need to make. The other thing that we see a lot is often the leaders in organizations, regardless of whether they're technology companies or otherwise, really speak a different language. CEO is thinking about risk in very different ways than a CSO, a chief security officer, is thinking about risk. So how do you gap between how do you sort of eliminate that gap, I should say, between the language that the CEO is speaking versus what the CSO is speaking. And so I think there's some education that needs to happen there as well. And then, like I said earlier, the board for businesses really need to understand the risks at hand. I've seen this personally. I've actually been on the other side where I've presented to the board vulnerabilities that exist. Here's some server patches that need to happen. Here's some user education that needs to happen. And by the way, each of those things are going to cost the company a dollar or two. Well, I historically didn't do a good job of communicating the risk and the potential impact. And so the board level understanding to really align to true business risk is really important. And again, some of that is education, some of that is through just constant communication. And also for us technology people to really, again, shift our message from being technology first to business outcome first, I think is extremely essential.
Yeah, and I think the skill set of being able to translate technology speak to layman's term is very important because
Yeah.
in the boardroom, not everybody speaks technology speak. So they're like, "What are you talking about? You telling me firewall and you're telling me, cyber resilience. What do you mean by that?" Like, if you can say it in layman's term, it's so much easier for them to understand and be like, "Oh, okay, well, I get that." Cyber resilience means that, we need to be ready versus
100%. And I think the way to do that, Tin, is through honestly speak what most people understand, which is dollars, right? Or
Mhm.
the potential loss of dollars,
Yeah.
or the potential loss of opportunity, the potential loss of reputation, the potential loss of credibility
Hmm.
in whatever market that you're in. CEOs and COOs and CFOs, they get that for sure.
Right.
There's a lot of, again, back to leveraging AI. There's a lot of really good AI tools that are available out there now that basically allow me to take a lot of data. So let's say let's use a real world example. Let's say I'm a manufacturing company and I'm $100 million manufacturing company. I'm in North Georgia and I'm in the carpet business. I'm just making this up. I can look at data and data leaks and data threats and vulnerabilities that exist in companies my size and in my sector, and some of that data is available publicly. The AI can help us decipher that data into something meaningful that the C levels understand. So you can say, look, here's a potential, I don't know, misconfigured firewall policy, on a DLP engine that's running on this Fortinet firewall. Okay. Most CEOs are going to be like, what are you talking about, man? What does that even mean? But if you
Right.
can translate that into, hey, that's a potentially $5 million, risk to the business, and here's how that number is generated, that gets people to pay attention. And I think that's what we as a technology community have to do a better job at.
Yeah. Because that hits home more
That hits
than,
home. That's
yeah,
exactly right.
that hits home more than,
That's exactly right.
Fortinet and firewall,
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
things.
Us cybersecurity nerds, we love to talk about UTM and DLP and all these fancy acronyms that we throw out there. But most people looking at it, okay, does it gonna make me lose sleep? Yes, it is, and here's why. And let me tell you.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Let's lose a lot of sleep.
Yes.
All right. So, why do you think that so many organizations still focus on protection versus resilience?
I think some of it is just, old habits are hard to break.
Hmm.
I think number one is that. I think organizations are, but the good news is that this is shifting. I see it more and more. I've been out. I'm in the luxurious position of traveling all over the country, and I get to spend time with really smart implementers of technology, implementers of cybersecurity, capabilities and solutions and processes. And more and more, I'm starting to hear this word or phrase, cyber resilience. We have to be cyber resilience. Like I said, every technology article around security that you read these days, and even publications like Harvard Business Review and others, talk about it in a proactive and an offensive angle than they do in a defensive angle. So I think this shift is happening in real time. I think the threat threats have gotten bigger. The targeted attacks have gotten a lot more sophisticated. And as a result, companies are having to adapt. Again, we don't adapt overnight. And I feel like that shift is definitely happening. Folks like myself and others, we're here to basically, kind of play guide and play Yoda, as you will,
Hmm.
to just coach and guide people through basically this transition. So I'm very bullish on organizations and leaders really thinking more about, like I said, a more proactive stance around security.
Yeah. We hear about zero trust, MDR, backup compliance,
Mhm.
and all these fancy cybersecurity words. But how do you explain cyber resilience to, the C-suite and the board in a way that they can get support?
Yeah, you do it in the I tell you, uh, you do it in a very simple language. What is utopia? And let's talk about it the user perspective. If the user connected to my company, whether he or she is an employee or a contractor or a vendor or a consultant or whatever, if the right user has access to the through the right device at the right time to the right data with the right policy, right? That's a lot of rights. That's like
Mhm.
five rights. How do you make all those rights? But if you explain it that way, that's really ultimately what security is right? Can I guarantee that the right user is basically in my network? First of all, I have to know what my network is. I have to know what devices are connected to my network. What is the right user? I have to have identity in place. I have to have, some kind of framework of zero trust in place. Maybe old days I used to have a VPN in place, but these days I've got to worry about things like SaaS applications that my users basically have access to. So you explain it in those terms and you explain it in really simple terms, and then you start layering in some of the technology that's basically required to make that happen. So the right user. Well, how do you know that that's the right user? How do you know that John Smith, who's an employee, is connected to my right, machine? Well, I have to have an identity And that identity has to align with that potential user. That identity then has to align with some kind of multi-factor authenticated approach. I don't want just a password. I need to do multi-factor. What does that mean, Mr. or Mrs. CEO? Well, passwords, as you know, are pretty easily broken. You need to have not only a password, which is something that somebody knows, along with something that somebody has, which is usually a code, on your mobile phone that's delivered. If you want to go another layer of security, it could be something that you are. That could introduce the notion of biometrics. So you literally start explaining it in fundamental levels
Hmm.
and how then technology can be layered on to ultimately create those five rights that I mentioned. That's what I found to be the most effective way to communicate that to business leaders.
That's cool. Because when I explain cybersecurity to small business owners,
Hmm.
what I use is the house.
Oh, love it.
So the house is, the data, right? Like the people who are inside the data and the users, right? And the doors are the security. The locks is the security, the windows are the security, and all these things are part of the cybersecurity to protect what's inside. So that's how I
I
plainly explain to the business owners, and most of the time they understand.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I've used that actually a couple of times, but I always say, you know what, if you're going to break into a house, let's to use that, continue that analogy, you're definitely not going to go, unless you're just dumb, you're not going to go through the front door. You're probably going to go find a side window that may be unlocked or easy to break. That's bad actors for you. They're looking at vulnerabilities that exist outside your network. You asked about MDR or managed detection and response. The first step of MDR is to know what's in your ecosystem. What are all the assets that are basically part of your company? And then once I know that, I can figure out how to monitor those in a proactive basis. And so what is MDR? Very simply, it's managed detection and response. I need to detect when certain threats are happening to regardless where my devices are. They could be in the office, they could be outside the office, they could be on a plane, flying into London. Guess what? Once I know that, I can basically have a team of people that are monitoring those along with AI and along with machines, along with the data analytics side of it on a real-time basis. And guess what? These threats that are happening aren't happening from the hours of 9 p.m. Eastern time to 5 p.m. Eastern time. They're not
Hmm.
happening during business hours. They may be, but they're also happening at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and they're international threats. So in order to be really truly secure from some of the bad actors, you got to look at your business from a 24-hour perspective. That's ultimately what MDR bring to the table, because most companies, unless you're Google or some of the larger Fortune 100 businesses, do not have the capacity themselves to be able to man a SOC, a security operations center, that is following the sun and has locations across the globe to be able to basically manage your ecosystem. And that's ultimately what MDR brings to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a lot of people think that businesses stop when it's closed,
Right.
but it's always on, right? You got to keep the lights on, you got to keep the computers on, and
That's right.
always turning, is always going, going, and going.
Yeah, it absolutely never shuts. Again, used to be you had a hacktivist or some the misconception is the hacker is some kid who's in his hoodie, usually a his or a he, and in the hoodie and sitting in a basement in a dark room and drinking Mountain Dews and basically trying to infiltrate you. It's not like that at all. I mean,
Right.
you may see that in Hollywood movies, but you've got professionals out there that are basically trying to infiltrate your network, and there's a number of monetary reasons why.
Yeah, because there's a lot of money out there.
Yes.
All right. What role does cyber insurance play in all of this, and why and how are organization being measured today?
Yeah. I took in 2024, and a little bit here in 2025, I spent some time looking through the major cyber insurance policies around the US. And ultimately, what is cyber insurance? It's again not an if, it's a when. The inevitable is going to happen. So when it does happen, are you prepared to again go back to operational sufficiency as quickly as possible? And so if you look at the typical cyber insurance policies today, there's about 12, 13 controls, that are basically summarized in most insurance policies. I'm not going to list all of them, but I'll give you some examples. As an auditor, somebody's going to come in and say, "Are you multi-factor authentication turned on? Yes or no? And if so, what's the technologies? Let's go through it. Do you have SSO, single sign-on? So basically, a user can log in with his or her credentials and then basically log into a third-party app as well. How does that work? Have your users been trained on making sure that they don't click on these phishing attacks? These are three of the many controls that are available or implicit within these cyber insurance policies. So first and foremost is the business. I spent a lot of time with businesses just educating them on what these controls are,
Hmm.
how that aligns or those align to technology and the type of solutions that we at Rapid Scale provide and other providers provide. But that's ultimately a good checklist for businesses to kind of follow as they're trying to harden their security posture. If I can go through a cyber insurance policy and say, okay, you know what, in order for me to get my premiums down at the lowest possible way, here's the things I need to basically implement. That's kind of the idea. And so the premiums are really tied to security maturity and posture. The more secure you are, the more mature you are in your security posture, the lower your premiums are going to be. And ultimately, like all insurance, it's a safety net. It's not a substitute for proper defense. I'd never tell a customer, "Oh my God, go get cyber insurance policy. Therefore, you don't have to do any of these things that I'm recommending." Not at all. It's not a safety net, right? It's a must-have for organizations, because inevitably they're going to be hit by something, and it's basically a insurance to make sure that they get operational as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's like driving a car.
A car, home insurance, right?
Yeah. All right. So let's say here, if you were advising a mid-sized organization with limited security maturity, where would you start?
Yeah, I'd probably start again. What is a business? LLC or a C corp or an S corp? Ultimately, it's just a bunch of people who've gotten together for a common vision, mission, cause, right? Each of those users, each of those employees, each of those vendors, each of those contractors are they have to be tied to an identity. So the first place I would start is identity and access management. Control who gets in. That's literally as simple as that. Make sure that you know as a business who is getting into your network and making sure there's roles and sort of responsibilities configured. The CEO may have super admin rights. The CFO may have super admin rights as well, but a vendor may not and shouldn't have, right? So it's that kind of granular policies. I would start there. Number two is I would ensure proper backups and make sure that you're testing your DR, your disaster recovery strategy regularly. So sort of the second layer with that would be backups and DR. And then thirdly, we've talked a little bit about the whole notion of MDR, deploy MDR. And again, you may not be able to afford, your own SOC, security operations center, but there's companies out there, including us at RapidScale, that can provide that at a handful of dollars per user or per device. And so what that does is it forces you to monitor your environment continuously. So if I had three kind of legs to a stool, it would be identity and access management, it would be backups and DR, and it would be basically an MDR solution. That in itself gives you a leg up on 99% of the businesses that are out.
So, in the analogy of the house,
Mhm.
you would say that one, you have the identity would be who has the keys, right? Who
Who
has the
has the
keys
keys? Great.
or the code of the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you say backup. Well, that would be testing your locks if the locks
Testing
work.
your locks. For those of you who are listening and viewing this, you may have a generator, right? Making sure your generator has enough diesel in it, making sure that you're plugging up your most important devices, right? In your home. Could be the refrigerator because you got a bunch of expensive meat in the freezer, right? It could be your internet router. Whatever you feel is absolutely essential when a devastating situation does occur. That's ultimately what we were talking about when we were talking about backups and a DR strategy.
Okay. And remind me the last one again.
MDR, managed detection and response, which really it's really nothing more than, I mean, again, I'm oversimplifying probably, but it forces an organization to monitor the devices and the users on a continual basis. 20, and you said it earlier, Tim, business just doesn't shut down at 5 o'clock. It's
Mm.
24/7, and you got to make sure that you're constantly, monitoring what's happening in your business.
So that would be in the home term, the home analogy would be the cameras per se.
There you go. There you go. Just just because you have cameras doesn't mean that they need to be viewed. They need to be watched.
Hmm.
They need to be recorded. All the footage, right? So in case something happens, you've got records of what's happened. I love your house analogy. In fact, you could basically talk about cybersecurity in that context pretty much 90% of the time.
Yeah. All right. So, what are two or three controls or capabilities that are a must-have in the for a resilient security posture?
I think I'll double down on what I just said. Number one is sort of identity-based access controls with multi-factor everywhere. If you guys are the viewers may be familiar with what happened with the MGM not that long ago. It was last year, right? That actually started. We had some insider information that actually started from MGM didn't have their they had MFA technology in place, and I'm not going to mention which technology because it wasn't a technology problem. They did not have it turned on. So number one is basically multi-factor authentication is something that's is super important. And number two would be the absolute essential controls is 24/7 threat monitoring, right? And response is you. That's a great analogy. Your cameras are on, they're being viewed, they're being watched, and you've got tools that are detecting anomalies. So if I log in from right now, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. If I log in from Atlanta and 7 minutes later I've logged in from the Philippines, probably a problem. There's something happening. So just making sure that those things are being monitored and responded to on a real time basis. And then I would say is you making sure that your backups are, in our technology world, we like to use the word immutable, right? Making sure that they're not changeable. That's a word. But that's basically it, is making sure when you do have backups, you're not only have backups that can't be infiltrated and can't be changed. And there's some technologies obviously to check that, doing some checksums and others, and making sure you're testing your process because recovery resiliency is not just about technology. It's about the people and it's about the process and it's about, in our world, it's basically making sure you have a playbook. So when something does happen, like there's a playbook. Okay, step one. I need to call the CEO. His or her number is, 770, whatever. Email is like there's literally a step-by-step instruction on, what we need to do as a business when things do go awry.
Well, that's called the DRP,
DRP.
the disaster recovery plan.
That's exactly right.
I had to write one of those. That was fun.
Not to be a a shameless plug, but that's what we do all day long. We spend time with customers, and the first thing we do is like, what are you trying to accomplish? What kind of business are you? And so
Hmm.
we'll actually help write some of those plans as well.
That was fun. I had to write a lot of plans. All right. So let's see here. What's the next question I have for you? How do tools like MDR, AI ops, or cloud native recovery change the game?
Yeah, MDR. And again, any of this stuff we're about to talk about, you can do yourself, right? You can set up your own security operations center. If you look at the latest reports, I'll tell you that you need about 25 people on a regular, again, we're talking about 24/7 cycles, right? So you need multiple shifts. So you need human beings, even with all the technology and all the AI and all the capability out there, you still need human beings to basically monitor, if you will, that camera footage.
Hmm.
So MDR brings expert sort of threat hunting without the need for full-time staff. So that's one. AI ops. So what does that mean? Again, fancy way to say, can I basically detect can I improve the detection and response and reduce alert fatigue? What does alert fatigue mean? Is you know how it is. You get it on your phone. You get alerts all the time from different applications, and at some point you're like, man, I'm tired of all these alerts. I'm not going to read any of them. That's what happens in business as well. AI ops gives me anomaly detection. It gives me some analytics to say, you know what, these are some things that are happening. Here's the trends, and you need to pay attention to those threats. So AI basically gives me some tools and some data analysis capability that I otherwise wouldn't be able to do, and ultimately eliminates this notion of alert fatigue. And then I would say tools like cloud recovery. Cloud native recovery allows me to just, recover faster. Goes back to the people, process, and technology side of the house. If I've got my workloads in the right cloud environment or multiple cloud environments, guess what? I need, I have tools that I can basically utilize to recover much, much faster. And these days, what did we say? Businesses are everywhere. People are everywhere, distributed, right? So you may be in different regions, you may be in different parts of the country, and so you need to be able to get up to speed and up to operational equivalency, like in across multiple geographies. That's what some of the cloud native tools basically give me the power to do.
That's cool. Now, which industries are making the biggest stride in resilience and which one are falling behind?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, any industry where you've got heavy regulatory pressure and certain mandates to comply to are frankly being forced to be much more proactive when it comes to their cyber resilience sort of posture, right? So examples of that would be financial services. The typical regulatory pressure that's there. If you're in banking, I trust, PCI, Sarbanes-Oxley, GLBA, which is Graham's Leach. So there's all kinds of regulatory at the federal level, at the state level. If you're in California, you know what I'm talking about. There's a whole slew of state level mandates that are driving, you to be much more proactive with the data that you control and have and leverage. Healthcare as well. HIPAA, early HIPAA is very different than new HIPAA, right? And this continues to evolve. A lot of stuff in old HIPAA was, hey, these are nice to haves, which is now translated or transformed into must-have, right? So healthcare is obviously leading a lot of these security and given the potential vulnerability of healthcare organizations with the data, we're talking about our PII. We're talking about all this interaction between and billing offices and billing codes and all the things that have to happen, in our very convoluted and very complex healthcare system, which by the way is about 19% of our GDP, as a country. So it's a huge industry, and privacy and regulatory drivers are obviously leading to some technology decisions there. I think so those are, I would say, the kind of the leaders, right? The laggards are, small to mid-sized companies, and regardless of industry, that frankly historically thought that they could do it themselves. They've been kind of lone rangers, or they've been on an island and they're like, well, I'm just going to hire an IT person. Great. But these days, what we see, and this is a good number, for every 100 employees, we see one IT person. So if you got a 500, employee company, you're lucky to have five IT people. And if you think about all the things that those IT people have to think about, right? Security, ransomware, infrastructure, desktop support, mobile phone support, application support, into it's the list is a mile wide. They just don't have the resources, time, and that's where the laggards basically show up. And this is why I exist. This is where my business exists, is to help organizations basically kind of partner up with organizations like us to harden your posture and to basically make sure you're doing all the things from a proactive perspective.
Yeah, I definitely see that because when I go do my networking, I network with a lot of SMB owners, and they don't have the time to think about
Yeah,
cybersecurity or even more so the IT space. So they're busy doing other stuff that they're really good at, right? So then
yeah.
what lags behind is the technology that is helping them hold their business together, but that's something that it's lagging.
I used to run. You're so right. Before Rapid Scale, I used to run a business, and 160 employees, about 16 locations. And I tell you, as much of a technology guy that I am, and I feel like, I've got a lot of experience in cybersecurity, even with all that, my number one priority was not technology at all. I just didn't have the time. My number one priority, frankly, was to make payroll on a regular basis, as
Right.
a small business. And so, yeah, as much as us technologists like to talk about technology and how technology can help elevate the business, the truth of the matter is that most technology is an afterthought. So partners, the ecosystem, advisors, we're super important being helping our businesses, the customers we serve, to just think about technology in a different lens.
Yep, absolutely. For our listeners, if they could do only one thing this quarter
Mm.
to get more resilient, what should it be?
I think number one is let's just start with an assessment. Let's just figure out where we are at, where you guys are at. Conduct a full cyber resilience assessment, and don't be afraid of the results. You know, know, knowing where knowing where you are helps you basically figure out where you're going to go. So that would be the one thing I would recommend. It's the whole old adage, the fox protecting the hen house. You probably don't want to do it yourself
Mm-hmm.
because you may find some bias and you may find some gaps in your thinking, and maybe you don't have the full sort of industry best practices in mind, not because you don't, just because you haven't had the exposure. So bringing in a third party to help you identify those gaps is a great place to start. So that would be the first thing I would recommend. Number two is, we've said it a couple of times, is if you do have a backup and recovery plan, test it. If you don't have one, create one. Work with a partner to create one and then test it, because there's so many organizations that have put a playbook in place without testing the playbook. So that would be number two, if I had a second. And then number three would be, let's deploy, some continuously monitoring thing, MDR, EDR, whatever, where you basically have a good understanding of who is inside your door and what devices are connected in your home, and to use your analogy. So
Yep.
that would be my final recommendation.
Yep. Very good recommendations. Um, Now let's go a little bit personal. Yep. So you are fluent in four languages
Yeah.
and very proud of your Indian roots. You read extensively about philosophy, Buddhist principle, and even Sikhism. How does these varied cultural and intellectual pursuits inform your perspective on technology and its potential for social impact?
Wow. Let me start with the social impact, right? I again, we started this conversation almost an hour ago. God, we could probably go on for hours here. This has been such a easygoing conversation. You're amazing at this. We started our conversation with this whole perspective thing, right? Um, been very lucky in my life. We were able to immigrate here to the U.S., and the opportunities that the U.S. has given me and my family are immeasurable. Not just measurable in money or success, but just impact to ourselves and to the community. So perspective is the number one place that I would start. And throughout my journey, there's been people that had no business helping me, but they would put their arms around me. I remember my first boss. I was a co-op or intern I was at Georgia Tech, and I worked at Georgia Power utility here in Atlanta. And Howard Smith, I don't know, maybe Howard Smith will be Mr. Smith will be, listening to this podcast. Who knows? I remember like my second week, he goes, listen, you're going to be enrolled in Toastmasters. I'm like, excuse me, sir, I don't know what that is. And he goes, don't worry about it. You will show up Monday morning to Toastmasters. And I found out that Toastmasters is this public speaking thing. I'm like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, I was scared. As a 19-year-old kid, the last thing I wanted to do was to get on a stage or whatever and talk to a bunch of random people about random things. But I tell you, those kind of instrumental, pushes from certain people really helped me throughout my career. So back to the technology and the impact. So we're constantly looking at ways on how technology can help people. I serve on the board at a couple of colleges. One of them is Atlanta Technical College. And one of the biggest things we do is to try to figure out how we can leverage technology to not only help people find jobs and careers in places of technology that otherwise they wouldn't see. I love that part of my journey. I also have been part of a couple of organizations that have raised upwards of $11 million federal money to help underserved and unserved communities to be internet enabled. We saw this during COVID, right? When kids were having to work from home or go to school from home, there was a lot of kids that didn't have internet connection because you have to make a choice. Do you feed yourself, or do you pay the $90 or whatever it is a month to AT&T for internet connection?
Right.
A lot of people can't make that choice. And so that's always the first thing I think about when I think about technology and how it can help organizations, and not only organizations, but humanity.
Hmm.
And you can go on, I can go on and on about technology in other countries and how it's been able to lift, certain sectors of society. So yeah, so so the reading, back to your question, the reading, the digesting of information, the constant conversations with people always remind me that, hey, if we look at this in a much more holistic way, overall, technology has helped, our do things that otherwise wouldn't be possible.
I couldn't agree more. And shout out to Mr. Smith.
Yes,
Now, as a self-described gadget guy and a Apple enthusiast who has built home theater and uses smart home devices like Alexa, what is the next piece of technology or smart home integration you're much excited about to implement in your life?
I wear these glasses, and we're not there yet. I don't think the Vision Pro is there yet. I don't think the Ray-Ban, Bose thing that is basically in market with Meta back end is quite there yet. But at some point in the evolution of technology, I think a true integrated eyeglass experience to basically augment your reality with certain relevant pieces of data and information could be really interesting. So I don't think we're there yet, but I feel like at some point over the next 4 or 5 years, 3, 4 years, 2 years, who knows? Technology moves fast. I feel like that could be a useful piece of technology that could actually help people with all kinds of impairment, all kinds of audio, sort of sensory issues, just to be, more impactful in society.
Well, I saw two technologies around glasses. One is the AI translator via
Yeah,
glass,
that's right.
also the teleprompter in the actual lens. That is something that I would like to.
That would, yeah. That if I had a teleprompter, I would probably, you know, do a better job on this podcast.
Well, same
So
here.
so yeah, absolutely. No, the teleprompter, I've seen that as well. So again, a little kludgy, just like any technology that's evolving, it's always kludgy, and then it evolves over time. So I'm looking forward to something, whether it's Apple or Google or Facebook or Meta, whatever, basically releasing something that is of interest. So far, whatever I've seen, I've tested, it's been, more of a toy than an impactful piece of technology.
So something that you feel underwhelming at this
Well, yeah,
point.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And those things are, like I said, I don't want big, thick lenses. I want or frames. I want something that's light and manageable. And again, Moore's law is always an impact, right? So at some point, processors will get smaller, computing will get more powerful, and then the software and the connectivity will basically be able to keep up. So at some point, we'll get there.
Yep, I agree. At some point. How soon? We'll
We'll
see.
see. We'll see. I'm sure you do as well. I pay attention to CES every year, see what the newest trends are. And yeah, so we'll see.
All right, to conclude, I like to ask this question to all of my guests, but you stole my thunder and used it at the beginning of the episode. Your superpower.
Mm,
So, in this one, what's a good question I can ask you? Okay. In the realm of superpowers, the ones that we know about from the DC Comics and Marvel, which one would you take?
wow. Okay. So you're talking about like a true superpower, not just the made up superpowers about translating a
Hmm.
technology into something of impact. I think I'd be Atom. Atom is basically the ability to go at light speeds from point A to point B. I think that would be incredible. If I could just like snap my fingers and show up in Hong Kong, that would be incredible. As a traveler, as a person who really enjoys different foods, different cultures, different perspectives, different lifestyles, and frankly, travel with a backpack so I can get anywhere pretty quickly. I'm just limited by planes, trains, and automobiles, right? So
Yeah,
if I could get somewhere like within a millisecond, that would be an amazing power to
to have.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be a good one because I like yourself, I like to travel, you know. train, planes,
Yeah,
automobile like you. I'm
yeah,
like, ah, and time,
yeah.
and
And
also
time.
time.
And time. I'm going to London on Thursday to spend some time, in Europe for a little while. And yeah, it's just the time. I got to do a red eye, I wish I could just eliminate that part of it and then
Hmm.
basically get there and do what I got to do.
Yeah, same here. I would love to just
Yeah.
be there.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I'm here. Okay. Well, it was a great conversation, and well, we will have another episode soon, and
Yes.
I'll talk to you then.
Thank you. This has been great. Like I said, we've gone, oh, it's 58 minutes. Unbelievable. We could have probably done another 58 minutes, but I'm sure our users or our viewers have something else to do.
Yeah,
So again, thank you for making it so easy. And I'm looking forward to doing this again.
absolutely. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Bye.
Bye. Good.